Well, let's come over to the BBC and see what the BBC has been up to. I picked on this article, which, when you start to read it, appears fairly benign, but there's a lot more to it. Afghan contractors, I wish I'd never worked for the UK government. Now, I'm labelling this as very devious and duplicitous reporting by the BBC. Let's see if I can explain why that's the case. But if we get into it, people who were working, particularly in education, were saying this. We taught the culture of the United Kingdom and their values in Afghanistan. In addition to the English language, we also taught about equality, diversity, and inclusion. According to that's the Taliban beliefs, it is out of Islam, it's unlawful. That's why they think we're criminals and we have to be punished. That's why we feel threatened. Alex, throw that straight back to you, because what the people doing the teaching didn't understand is that what they were teaching was designed to break down culture in Afghanistan. That's the whole purpose of bringing in particularly BBC type culture. It is to destroy communities, destroy the existing culture in Afghanistan and replace it with something completely different.
Of course, that's its aim. And these British values, which he so perfectly trips off, equality, diversity, and inclusion, only were enunciated as such a maximum of 15 years ago. Certainly by 2010, it was being heard of. And he's picked it up secondhand, really. So he will not be aware of just the amount of deceitfulness involved, that the values of, you might call it cultural Marxism or permanent revolution, were enshrined from central government level downwards, certainly by the Equality Act 2010. And now that phrase that's on everyone's lips has supplanted any previous British value, such as rationalism, common sense, or decency. We don't have people teaching that in Afghanistan, do we?
No, and I also say, and if it's upsetting, if the BBC standard of culture is upsetting the Taliban, it's upsetting me and a great many other people here in UK. Now, the gentleman who made the statement, we can't show a picture, but we just bring this up on screen to complete the series, as it were, is a gentleman called Amar. He was working for the British Council as an English teacher. And of course, he is saying that what he's doing, and I'm going to say unwittingly, is being used to seed an agenda which is designed to break down Afghan culture. He goes on to say that so he's talking about the Taliban, took me to the police station asking about whether I'd worked for a foreign government. Luckily, they didn't find any evidence in my home or on my phone. But I don't think it's the end. They're keeping an eye on me. So this individual is clearly suffering now as a result of being used for political purposes by Britain and the British Council. And then when they're in a vulnerable state, they've been abandoned by Britain and more or less left to a pretty uncertain fate in Afghanistan. So this is I'm short of words to describe this, Alex, because I think what the British government is doing here and what the BBC is doing is outrageous. It's immoral. It is disgusting. These people are being put at risk as a result of the BBC and the British Council.
Of course, and these are not formally arms of the British government, only de facto. So you can wriggle off the hook, at least by law, when people have been used as agents of a certain agenda, and you're told you have a certain duty to them. Those who were interpreters for the armed forces, for example, have in most cases, with many wicked exceptions, been allowed to save their lives by coming to Britain, where they suffer many further struggles. But those who were, shall we say, merely working for the soft power, for the NGO complex, the British Council and the BBC, don't even get that small comfort.
Yeah. Well, we'll follow it through because they had a lady speaking, Nouria. She said this: it was challenging for us. Some people had extremist thoughts and would often say, what you are teaching is unacceptable to us. To which I say, I'm not surprised in the least. It's unacceptable here in UK, or a lot of it is. Everywhere we went, we were seen as representatives of the British government. Unfortunately, Mike, that's true, but these people simply didn't realise it. And she goes on to say, some thought of us as spies for the UK. But it's worse than that, because effectively, not only are they reporting back what they see in their own country, they're unknowingly being used as subversives by the British government and the BBC and the associated agents. The article itself goes on to say the British Council relocated. Sorry, this is a combination between a statement in the article and words from Nouria herself. The British Council relocated those who worked in the office but left us behind. They didn't even tell us about the UK Foreign Office Afghan relocation assistance policy when it came out. So they're used and then they're betrayed by the UK government and the British Council. Absolutely disgusting. Another gentleman was working as a senior advisor on UK government projects. So this is hand in glove with the UK government. And the article says he showed us, the BBC, a summons letter sent to his family home earlier this year from the Taliban's Interior Ministry, asking him to go to a police station for investigation. He's received 3 such letters. And Jafar says, I've been in hospital because of stress and shock. I can't sleep. The doctor has given me strong medicines, but even those don't help much. My wife is also suffering from depression. I don't let my children go to school. I fear they may be recognised. So on top of everything else, we've now got mental health issues. That's further abuse as a result of the original abuse by the British government and its agents and the betrayal. Now, it's interesting that if we go to the British Council and we have a look through the trustees, I was not surprised to see that immediately we've got key individuals. This is Thomas Drew, not saying this gentleman's done anything wrong. I don't know what he's done wrong, but the fact he's Director General Defence and Intelligence of the Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office must mean that the British Council is linked very closely with the government's policies. Alex, you'll know this better than I will, but effectively the British Council is standing up and saying it's improving democracy in countries around the world, but actually it's got a very strong heart, which is closely linked, as we're seeing here, with British defence and intelligence.
Often the way, Brian. This evening I'll be making the point that NATO as well says that one of its key benefits is that it is promoting and extending democracy in our countries. So it's a weapon being used as, again, subversively against us to re-educate us in our values. As for that role that Thomas Drew has, I don't recall there being, during my time, a Foreign Office Department for Defence and Intelligence. There was one known as Security Policy, but this is something that's all been rejigged since 2010 or perhaps a bit later.
So we can really summarise that by saying we're not saying anybody doing anything wrong, but when you've got a title which is Defence and Intelligence, we'd like to know what's happening. But let's take another person. This is Stevie Spring, the chairman of the British Council. And I was just stunned to find that she's also chairman of Mind. So when we see that these poor people in Afghanistan are suffering unbelievable stress and mental illness, did she take this into account before these people were employed on tasks which placed them absolutely in the spotlight for being accused of working with the British government? I tried to call the British Council this morning, but nobody's answering their phone lines. Apparently they're all working from home in these very difficult times. But let's get back to the BBC because their articles carry on. Here's from Kabul and Beyond, a year of Taliban rule in Afghanistan. And what the BBC is busy doing here, of course, is stirring up trouble by now saying that what is being enacted as policy in Afghanistan is, of course, not in line with where the BBC would like to go. So 2 of their headlines, Kabul, where women are told to give their jobs to the men, and then Star Student, that's a lady shut out of class in Herat.
Sorry, that first headline, Kabul, where women are told to give their jobs to men.
Yes, so women who've already got a job are being asked to stand down, and men who haven't got a job are being encouraged to step forward to take the job over.
But isn't that what the RAF's doing in the opposite sense?
Well, thank you, Mike. That's very helpful because this might be an emotional one for somebody, but we've got to understand the culture of the country and the fact that I would guess that for many families, if the man doesn't have a job, the family doesn't survive at all. And I'm going to guess that maybe some of the women with the jobs are coming from educated families, so they're benefiting possibly from a dual income. But of course, the BBC is not going to do the research. And this is where we can dig in deeper to see how it goes, because one of the journalists who created that article, Lisa Doucet, if I pronounced that
Lisa
correct.
Doucet.
Doucet,
Yes.
you sure about that?
Positive.
Okay, I wouldn't want to make a mistake with Alex here. He's nodding wisely. She's down as a BBC presenter and chief international correspondent. Canada is my country. London is my city, but I'm at home in many places. So she's effectively a globalist in my book. And little interview here. We should have the clip where she's talking to a journalist. Let's see whether this one comes up.
Yes.
Here we are. And we can just discuss it after we've listened to it.
But you came back. How easy, difficult is it now for you to operate here as a journalist?
It's easier than I assumed it would be. To be honest, I've never felt that my job is to represent a government. I didn't represent the Islamic Republic. I don't represent the Islamic Emirate. I'm not here for political reasons, or I don't even really necessarily want to cover political issues. There's a humanitarian crisis here. That's the most important issue that needs to be covered, that people need to know about. My biggest fear is not necessarily for myself. My biggest fear is for the people that I interview. Often I worry that, when I talk to people, that it could get them in trouble. A lot of times now you end up changing their names, but it's interesting, you kind of have this weird feeling that if I say, like, someone's name is Omar and I call them Bilal in Jalalabad or Mazar, if the wrong person gets in trouble. It's this weird sort of feeling, and it's wanting to protect your sources. That's the most important thing for me.
But it must weigh on your mind that journalists have gotten into trouble. Afghan journalists, they've been detained, they've been tortured. Media watchdogs talk about the abuses of Afghan journalists. This can't be taken lightly.
Absolutely not. And, this is an issue that I've covered from when the Taliban first came to power. It's an issue that I track now. It's an issue I tracked when I was in Doha and in Turkey. And it is, because as you said earlier, thousands of journalists have lost their jobs. The one thing that was always amazing, watching the Afghan media, whether you went to a TV station or a radio or whatever it was all these young people in their 20s and their 30s, men and women, running these TV stations. You and I have worked for big networks. It's not like that anywhere else in the world. The BBC is not run by a bunch of 20-year-olds. Tolo and One TV were, yes, and still are. And that's an amazing, amazing thing to watch.
Well, there we are. My point over this is, where does the loyalty of this young man lie? Because clearly he's been completely groomed by the media organizations in the US. And now he's coming and he's going to be reporting on matters in Afghanistan. Is he going to be reporting in an independent way, or is he going to be reporting along the lines that he's been trained within the Western media system? So, not criticizing him as an individual, but unwittingly, again, I think that he's been groomed by the West to produce the sort of media the West wants to hear. Am I being unfair on this, Alex?
No, you're not being unfair, because we've seen this in the post-Soviet space, Ukraine and Georgia notably, and what he's saying towards the end here about how amazing it is to have 20-somethings running TV channels. Well, without giving any secrets, you and Mike and David, who run UK Column, none of you is in your 20s or even 30s anymore. And I think that was a conscious decision, wasn't it? That some men who actually knew something about the world should probably be responsible for the news output.
Well, it seems to have some sense to it. But I just want to end this segment by reinforcing the dirty deeds of the BBC. I came across this document, The Future of Media in Afghanistan. It was published in 2013. It's talking about Afghan media leaders in a wider dialogue, a consultative dialogue amongst Afghan media leaders and journalists discussing the future of Afghan media, promoted by the 2012 BBC Media Actions Policy Briefing, The Media of Afghanistan, the Challenges of Transition. Well, who's deciding what Afghan media should transition from to, and would it possibly transition to something that disagreed with the BBC? I think the answer to that is going to be no. So in the conclusions and recommendations, there was strong endorsement by all participants that an inclusive and Afghan-led media dialogue was long overdue, but BBC Media Action is leading this. It's not the Afghan people themselves, and it should be the first of many. So this is BBC Media Action and the British government moving in to take control of the media in Afghanistan. And here's a bit more detail on it. It says that the policy briefing entitled "The Media of Afghanistan: The Challenge of Transition" echoes it. It explored the current state of the media in an environment marked by increased politicization on the one hand and the diminished donor funding on the other. It concluded that unless a mechanism was put in place to ensure continued support for the international community, the Afghan media risked derailing the democratic transition underway rather than consolidating it. The arrogance is overwhelming here. Mike, I'm going to throw it back to you because, of course, this is not building democracy. This is destroying a country and its culture and its community to replace it with a false democracy.
Yeah, Alex talked about Georgia and Ukraine. We shouldn't forget Syria either. BBC Media Action in there since 2004. And before we know it, there's a civil war going on. And then we've got the UK mainstream press using journalists from Syria that they trained. And then when they present them on the UK's media, they present them as being some kind of independent local voice. And they never acknowledge the fact that they were trained by the BBC in the first place.
Yes. Well, there's a lot more to be told on this, but I'm sure the audience today gets the idea. Is the BBC to be trusted in UK? No. Is it to be trusted overseas? Certainly not.